If you've got a new whitetail property but you're not really sure where to start, keep watching because I'm going to walk you through the 3-step process that I use every time I'm putting together a plan for a new piece of land. For this video, I'm going to be using the whitetail property that my wife and I recently purchased. It's right down here in the heart of southern Ohio hill country. It has a very steep elevation profile. It's a primarily south-oriented facing slope with a lot of natural features that are already attractive for the deer, so it comes with its own set of opportunities and challenges as far as habitat improvement goes. Right now the property is very raw with no habitat improvements in place, but I've received some intel that we're in a very trophy-rich area, so I'm very confident that with the right plan in place, the sky's the limit. But before I fire up the chainsaw and get to work, I want to walk you through the 3-step process that I'm going to use anytime I'm putting together a design for a new property. Whether it's my property here or a property that I'm putting together a design for a landowner, these 3 steps are what help me make sure that all of the habitat improvements that we do are aligning with the way that these deer naturally want to use the land. Whether you're working with a new property like I am, or you're making improvements to an existing one, this approach is going to help you make smarter and more effective habitat improvements. So with that, let's jump into step 1, understanding the natural flow of deer movement. Now before you make any habitat improvements on a property, it's always critical to understand how exactly the deer are using it. So this means figuring out things like where are they feeding, where are they bedding, and how does that terrain really narrow down and influence their travel patterns. On my property, the best natural food source that we have are the oak trees. In the southwest corner of the hill, there's a high density of reds, whites, and chestnut oaks, so there's a good seasonal food source in the fall for these deer, concentrated around the southwest section. Now when it comes to bedding, thick cover is very limited, but I've already found a few classic hill country bedding locations. Deer are already bedded near the higher elevation areas where they have this great view of the lower terrain. Another key factor is the terrain itself. This property actually already has a couple bench systems. One near the top of the hill about 1/3 of the way down, and then a second near the bottom of the hill. These benches are like highways for deer movement, and they funnel this activity in ways that I can use to my advantage. Understanding these natural patterns is the foundation for making smart habitat improvements. If you skip this step, you're going to risk working against the natural flows of deer movement on your property. But now that you have a solid grasp on the natural flows, it's time to move on to step 2, which is identifying the opportunities within the natural flow of deer movement. Now that I have a better understanding of how deer are naturally using the property, it's time to identify the ideal locations for the habitat improvements based on what the terrain allows. One of the main features on my property are the steep slopes, with some of the sections having angles steeper than 30 degrees. There's also a large boulder wall near the top of the hill which serves as a natural barrier for deer movement. These areas are difficult for deer to travel through or over, which leads them and funnels them down to these more gradual terrain areas, and those more gradual terrain areas become the places I want to focus my habitat improvements. With the steep slopes limiting the areas that I can plant food plots, I've identified a few flat zones where I will actually be able to plant them. Now the key here is that I'm not going to be able to have good access into all of these food plot areas, but I'm okay with that trade-off because I'm going to be providing the deer with a safe and secure place to eat within the core area of my property. I'll dive into my strategy for these plots in a later video, but for now it's important to note that with a limited amount of flat land, I have to do the best with what I have. Finally, the rugged terrain impacts how I'll access my stands. With only one access point at the bottom of the hill, I need to be strategic about how exactly I get around my property without disturbing the deer's core habitat. My solution is going to be to create a perimeter access trail that's going to allow me to quietly and effectively move around my property. This trail is going to serve as a dual purpose for us, both as a hunting access route and recreational trail for family hikes, making it practical for personal use as well. Now that I've identified these opportunities, it's time to put together a plan that aligns with my long-term goals for the property. I want to ensure that the property remains productive for years and years to come. So let's move on to step 3, developing a plan that aligns with your goals, the time you have available, and the budget of what you want to invest into the property. Now that I've identified the natural features and opportunities on the property, it's time to create a plan that aligns with my long-term goals. My vision for our property is pretty simple. I want to build a habitat and hunting strategy that maximizes my chances of harvesting top-tier bucks that the area has to offer. We're in a phenomenal area of southern Ohio, so the potential here is huge. To reach this goal, I'm fully committed to investing both time and money into the property. The land is very raw right now, but I have a series of habitat improvements lined up for the first year that's going to help me shift deer behavior in front of some of the more optimal stand locations and better hunter access routes. The key here is going to be balance. I need to prioritize the improvements that'll give me the best chance at success while also being mindful of my time as well as my budget. It's all about striking the right balance, focusing on the projects I can realistically complete this year while avoiding the temptation to take on too much at once. Each improvement should move me closer to my vision of attracting mature bucks and creating a thriving environment for them. All right, let's quickly recap what we covered here today. Step 1, assessing the property and understanding how the natural features drive deer movement. Once we get a better understanding on this movement, we can begin to set the property up for success. Step 2, then we identified the key areas for habitat improvements, whether it's optimizing food plot locations or creating effective access trails. These are the areas where we can make the biggest impact based on the terrain. And finally, step number 3, we align those opportunities with our long-term goals, ensuring we're taking into consideration both the time we have available and the budget, so that way we can create a plan that not only aligns with these goals, but we make sure it's actionable and sustainable. If you like this video and you found it helpful, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tips and insights. And if you're looking for more interactive and in-depth content, I'd love for you to join my SKOOL community where we deep dive into habitat design, whitetail management, and so much more. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.